2. Mesopotamia. In the Mesopotamian worldview, the tension between creation and chaos was also basic, but it was not viewed with the same confidence as in Egyptian thought. For the Egyptians, the order had arrived and had to be maintained. The Mesopotamian feared the nearness of anarchy. To the Mesopotamian, accordingly, cosmic order did not appear as something given. Rather, it became something achieved through a continued integration of the many individual cosmic worlds, each so powerful, so frightening. His understanding of the cosmos tended, therefore, to express itself in terms of integration of wills, that is, in terms of social orders such as the family, the community, and, most particularly, the state. To put it succinctly, he saw the cosmic order as an order of wills, as a state. For the Mesopotamians, kingship had descended from heaven. The king was mortal, but his responsibilities were a part of the divine calling. The gods were part of society, and the struggle between cosmic order and chaos was a concern of gods and men alike. Man's prospects in this struggle were bleak, in that chaos triumphed over him in the form of death. The Gilgamesh epic portrays Gilgamesh as man seeking immortality and failing through no fault of his own. The epic lacked any sense of original sin. Man is not a sinner, but an innocent victim. Man's life was comprehended and made comprehensible not through religion, but through the state, for religion was, in essence, political theory. The state, rather than God, is thus the basic environment of man, and a ruler is beyond appeal in his authority, for there is no order which transcends the state. The gods of the state cannot be appealed to against the state. A crowd with no leader to organize and direct it is lost and bewildered like a flock of sheep without a shepherd. It is also dangerous, however. It can be destructive, like waters which break the dams that hold them and submerge fields and gardens if the canal inspector is not there to keep the dams in repair. Finally, a leaderless, unorganized crowd is useless and unproductive, like a field which brings forth nothing if it is not ploughed. Hence, an orderly world is unthinkable without a superior authority to impose his will. The Mesopotamian feels convinced that authorities are always right. The command of the palace, like the command of Anu, cannot be altered. The king's word is right. His utterance, like that of a god, cannot be changed. For destruction and chaos to overwhelm a state meant a like fate for its gods. Thus, the goddess Ningal is seen in a lamentation over the destruction of Ur by Elamites and Sumerians as herself defeated and homeless. For the Sumerians, a king was the vicegerent of God upon earth, tenant farmer they called him, and the god was the real ruler of the land. The king was thus, in a very real sense, the god of this world in terms of his vicegerency. In the Akkadian Amarna letters, the monarch is addressed as the king, my lord, my pantheon, my sun god. In biblical literature, God, by virtue of his transcendence and deity, is beyond exhaustive knowledge, but by virtue of his total self-consciousness, is the source of certain knowledge. His word for men is clear-cut and knowable. The Mesopotamian gods, being involved in a being common to men and chaos, and involved in a cosmic struggle of questionable outcome, are neither totally sovereign nor fully self-conscious. They can be defeated, and they can be self-defeating. The results for the worshipper is clearly moral confusion. How can he truly know gods who do not know themselves? Oh, that I only knew that these things are well-pleasing to a god. What is good in one's sight is evil for a god. What is bad in one's own mind is good for his god. Who can understand the counsel of the gods in the midst of heaven? The plan of a god is deep waters. Who can comprehend it? Where has befuddled mankind ever learned what a god's conduct is? Akkadian man could only approach the gods in slim and dubious confidence of his own righteousness. My clean hands have made a sacrifice before you. For the Sumerians, the primeval sea engendered the cosmic mountain consisting of heaven and earth united. The primeval sea or chaos was thus the source and ground of heaven and earth, and despite all tensions, their ultimate governor. Sumerian religion, in particular Inanna or Ishtar worship, utilized large numbers of eunuchs and perverts, hierodules and other types of sacred prostitutes. These represented religiously controlled chaos, but ultimately chaos overtook man and the state. Meanwhile, the mountain or primeval hillock or pyramid represented order as against chaos. The ziggurat, or temple, tower, or step pyramid, was the religious expression of this faith from at least the days of Sumer. The ziggurat was a link or bond between heaven and earth, in their common ascent in being and their war against chaos. Barrett has stated, thus, the ziggurat appears to me to be a bond of union whose purpose was to assure communication between earth and heaven, for what is the mountain but a giant stepladder by means of which a man may ascend as near as possible to the sky? The mountain, then, was the bond between heaven and earth against chaos. Sumerian mythology identifies the mountain for us. Your king is the great mountain, the father Enlil. Man's hope, therefore, is comprehended in the form of the state and the person of the king. There is here no concept of an area of freedom from status control, because man has no area of transcendence to the state. His life and hope is the state. In this perspective, the alternative to total statism is not liberty under God, but chaos, and the unhesitating choice for the state. Indeed, an alternative to the state does not exist to any real degree, if at all. Your king is the great mountain, the father Enlil. But the source and wellspring of that order is chaos, and hence the Mesopotamian pessimism. The pre-Hittite Anatolian religion was naturalistic and shared in Ishtar worship. Hittite religion, with variations, clearly showed the same war against chaos. The title of the Hittite king was the sun. When he died, he became a god. The god was to his worshippers exactly what a master was to his slaves. His representative was the king, who was chief priest. The access to the gods was thus mediated by the king. The state was thus again the order of existence and man's entire world. Man was a creature of the state, and theology was a branch or aspect of political science. The Babylonian Code of Hammurabi saw the authority of law in an enduring kinship, which, like the sun, rose to light up the land. Nippur Duranki, the cult center of Enlil, set forth the bond of heaven and earth. Hammurabi saw himself as the shepherd of the people whose deeds are pleasing to Ishtar, and as the ancient seed of royalty, the powerful king, the son of Babylon, who causes light to go forth over the lands of Sumer and Akkad, the king who has made the four quarters of the world subservient, the favourite of Inanna am I. As Unger pointed out, whereas Moses proclaimed law as the law of Jehovah, thus saith the Lord, in the immanent religion and political theory of Babylon, Hammurabi proclaimed the law, I establish law and justice. In Hammurabi's law, the entire population is theoretically in slavery to the king. Kingship was lowered from heaven and the Assyrian monarchs proclaimed themselves king of the world, because their order represented the true cosmic order which the gods established, and made the kings shepherding as agreeable to the people as is the smell of the plant of life. The Assyrian monarch was not only the great shepherd and source of order, but he was also the source of chaos. He was Usum-Gal, the giant snake and or great dragon, and the source of terror. I am Shalmaneser, the legitimate king, the king of the world, the king without rival, the great dragon, the only power within the four rims of the earth, overlord of all the princes, who has smashed all his enemies as if they be earthenware, the strong man, unsparing, who shows no mercy in battle. The Assyrian monarch therefore represented both chaos and order, and he was the incarnation of both. The fearful power of Assyria rested not only in its military might, but also in its summation of the dialectic of chaos and creation in the terrifying person and activity of the Assyrian king. For the Assyrian, there was no escape from chaos into order, nor any escape from the total order of the states into chaos, since both chaos and order were summed up in the monarch and the state. We can agree with Oppenheim's comments concerning the religion of the common man in Assyria and Neo-Babylonian cultures. At bottom, his outlook was that of a fatalist. Resignation. There was no salvation. A prayer found in Assurbanipal's library expresses this unhappy mood. O Lord, my transgressions are many, great are my sins. O God, whom I know or do not know, my transgressions are many, great are my sins. The God whom I know or do not know has oppressed me, the goddess whom I know or do not know has placed suffering upon me. Although I am constantly looking for help, no one takes me by the hand. When I weep, they do not come to my side. Man is dumb, he knows nothing. Mankind, everyone that exists, what does he know? Whether he is committing sin or doing good, he does not know. The monarch himself, who embodied both chaos and order, echoed this pessimism. A letter of Assurbanipal quotes two proverbs expressive of cynicism. When the potter's dog went into the oven, he even growled at the potter. A sinful woman at the gates of a judge's house, her words prevail over that of her husband. The cosmic mountain was basic to Babylonian thoughts as to all thought in the ancient world, with various modifications from Egypt to China. The king, in the context of a ritual, was God. At times he was the link between the gods and the people whom they had created to do them service. He represented the people before the gods, and in turn was the pipeline through which the gods regulated the affairs of the state for the people. Mankind was made from the bloods of a slain god, and in another myth, the gods declared to the goddess Mami, "You are the primeval womb, creatress of mankind." There was thus a continuity of being between gods and men. This continuity of being was an important aspect of astrology then and now, since astrology was based on the theory of correspondence between the earth and the sky. This correspondence rested in a common being which, in its varying aspects, manifested a like power in the stars and in men. Babylonian omens saw chaos as the source of fertility and power. Thus, if a man in his dream goes in sexually to a wild beast, his household will become prosperous. Temple prostitution was present in Babylon, as it almost invariably is where chaos is an aspect of the religious dialectic. Jacobson, in his discussion of the cosmos as a state and the functions of the state, has called attention to an important aspect of Mesopotamian thought. The fact that the Mesopotamian universe was conceived of as a state, that the gods who owned and ruled the various city-states were bound together in a higher unity, the assembly of the gods, which possessed executive organs for exerting outward pressure as well as for enforcing law and order internally, has far-reaching consequences for Mesopotamian history and for the ways in which historical events were viewed and interpreted. It vastly strengthened tendencies toward political unification of the country by sanctioning even the most violent means used toward that end. For any conqueror, if he was successful, was recognized as the agent of Enlil. It also provided, even at times when national unity was at a low ebb and the many city-states were, for all practical purposes, independent units, a background on which international law could work. Two implications are clearly apparent here. First, the universe was a state, and Earth should be a state. Both Assyria and Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar sought to unify the world of their day, forcibly moving and dispersing recalcitrant peoples in order to break down old loyalties and to create a unified empire. Second, it was the successful conqueror, not the legitimate ruler, who was the agent of Enlil, the instrument of the gods. This placed a premium on force and violence, but even more, it declared that the divine law and order was manifested in the most powerful force of the day, beyond which there could be no appeal because the powers of heaven were manifested in it. Another and widely different power could manifest the divine agency tomorrow, but it always rested at the moment with the greatest existing power. Nebuchadnezzar, born into this faith, could ask incredulously of the three Hebrews, "And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands?" Daniel 3:15. For Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to appeal to a God beyond Nebuchadnezzar for vindication was to him an incredible thing. Whatever the gods were and sought to be for that day was manifested in history in the person of Nebuchadnezzar. Tomorrow was an unknown factor, and Nebuchadnezzar could plead in prayer that his descendants rule forever over the black-headed, with a strong sense of the instability of history, knowing that the king who was representing the gods today could tomorrow be their victim. Thus, whereas in the Egyptian view, the king was recognized as the successor of the creator, the Mesopotamian king was sometimes identified more clearly with the suffering god. Pessimism was close at hand in Mesopotamian thought.